All right, awesome. People are coming in. Hi, everyone. There are so many people on this event, so we are going to give it a second to let Zoom fill up the room, but we'll get started in just a minute. But thank you all so much for coming. This is our biggest event this whole year. So we are so honored to have you all here. Thank you so much. All right, we've got about half the room filled so far, so we're going to give it another few seconds. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started and people can keep coming in. But hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Kerfoot. I'm the Director of Events for Politics and Prose, and I just want to go over a few little technical items with you before we start. First, I know that all of you had to buy a copy of State of Terror to get into this event, but the holidays are coming up. Please support your local indie bookstore and buy another copy. I will put a link for that in the chat, but this book is perfect for anyone on your list. So do your shopping early and cross somebody off. We should also have some extra book plates available. So while supplies last, we should still have some of those if you order super early. Also, the chat is open, so we'd love to hear where you're zooming in from. I know everybody's coming from different places, so let us know where you're coming from. And finally, I have turned on closed captioning. If you want to turn it off, all you have to do is, if you're on a laptop, just find that live transcript button at the bottom, and there's a CC icon. You should be able to turn your captioning on and off that way, but we just want to make sure that this event is as accessible as possible. All right, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Alyssa Muscatine, the co-owner of Politics and Prose.
Thanks so much, Brittany, and good evening, everyone. As Brittany said, I'm Alyssa Muscatine. I co-own Politics and Prose with my husband, Brad Graham, and on behalf of our terrific staff, we welcome you to tonight's edition of PNP Live. Like all of you, we are absolutely thrilled to have Hillary Rodham Clinton and Louise Penny, two of our favorite author guests, with us for a discussion of their new thriller, State of Terror. This is what it looks like. Awesome cover, beautiful. The book is hot off the presses. It just launched into the world yesterday. It's already getting rave reviews in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and plenty of other places. Now, you may be wondering why a literary partnership between a revered political leader and a world-renowned mystery writer would be creating so much buzz. After all, the world already has a couple of those books. But let me just say that State of Terror is different. It's more than a partnership between two accomplished professionals with distinct experiences and talents. It is a rare collaboration built on deep friendship, a shared humanitarian spirit, and the spunk and spark of two extraordinary women determined to offer a path forward in an uncertain and often terrifying world. And did I mention that they're both women? Because we will be talking about that more in a minute. Hillary Clinton is, of course, the only woman ever nominated for president by a major political party. She's a former Secretary of State, two-term US Senator from New York, and First Lady of the United States. Beyond her political and government career, she now hosts an excellent podcast on iHeartRadio called You and Me Both. She runs an advocacy organization, Onward Together, to support grassroots political candidates and causes. She was recently appointed the first woman chancellor of Queen's University in Belfast, and Oxford University this month is endowing a chair in women's history in her name. She's also the best-selling author of nearly a dozen books of nonfiction, but most important for our purposes tonight, she has a new title, novelist. And what a successful debut Secretary Clinton is having as a fiction writer with State of Terror. Her co-author, Louise Penny, is one of the world's most beloved, most respected writers of crime novels that routinely top the New York Times bestseller list, that haul in literary award after literary award after literary award, and that have been translated into 31 languages. Canadian citizen, she received in 2017 the Order of Canada for her contributions to Canadian culture. And as any fan of her Chief Inspector Armand Gamache novels knows, Louise brings a uniquely compassionate and caring sensibility to her characters and her stories. It's a trademark of her life outside of writing as well. She's a model of public citizenship, supporting programs for battered women, Alzheimer's sufferers, and the local hospital near her village outside of Montreal. So first of all, congratulations to you both for producing a truly remarkable book together. And thank you for having P&P help you launch it into the world. What an honor for us. As Brittany said tonight, I have the humbling task of serving as the moderator for the discussion. And I want to begin with an overarching question. The book State of Terror is really a warning about the existential threats that the world faces when corrupt, narcissistic, craven, incompetent people are handed the levers of power. And I cannot imagine what on earth gave you the idea to write about that. No, seriously, I mean, I am only half joking. Seriously, can you tell us a little bit about how you decided to take on a project that was, frankly, a bit risky from a literary and reputational standpoint? You've become very good friends. You both love mysteries. One of you, writes mysteries for a living. The other of you is a seasoned politician and diplomat and public servant. And I gather you were both, and you write about this a little bit in your acknowledgments, you were both a bit skeptical when the idea was first presented to you, I think by your agents, both independently. What exactly do you think they had in mind, and what convinced you to do it?
Hillary, why don't you take that? But before you do, I do want to thank you, Lisa, for this and Politics and Prose, which is one of the great bookstores, not just in North America, but in the world. And
thank you.
It means a lot to be here. And Hillary, I'll let you start this off.
Well, amen to that. And Lisa, it's always a joy to be with you. And I'm delighted that there are so many people joining us virtually. We wish we could be there in person, but that was not to be. So, your question is exactly the right one. Louise and I have been lucky enough to be friends now over the last couple of years, brought together by a really dear lifelong friend of mine, a woman named Betsy Johnson Ebeling, who was able to get to know Louise and then introduced us. And it's been just a wonderful experience becoming Louise's friends after having admired and loved her books for so many years. When the idea was broached to us by our respective individual agents, and many of you know my agent attorney, Bob Barnett, if you're in the Washington area, I think it was, kind of an idea thrown out there. Like, what would you think about this? Would you
real kind of
entertain it?
Kind of a Hail Mary pass, wouldn't you think? Yeah.
Really. And as you alluded, there had been, a book written by a former president with a mega best-selling fiction writer. No names are necessary. And so I think that I was skeptical. I thought, I really, I admire so much Louise's writing. I love her as a friend. I don't know that this is the right thing to do. I've never written fiction. I wouldn't even, feel comfortable. Anyway, I expressed that skepticism, but I did say, look, if Louise were interested, then I would want to talk with her and really have a very open conversation about what this would mean, how it would work, what she thought about it. And so that's what I said. And over to you, Louise.
I said, no way do I want to work with that woman. No. My agent, David Gernert, got in touch with me, and I was excited. The idea of writing something with Hillary, not only as a friend, but certainly as the former Secretary of State. What an astonishing proposal. But it was a risk. It certainly, if we're going to be totally honest with you, appealed to my ego, for sure. And that often is the one that answers before the brain actually kicks in. Fortunately, I said, let me think about it, as Hillary did, because it was a risk. As you said, I'd never written a political thriller. Hillary hadn't written fiction before, and we had our friendship. I had never written with a collaborator. I didn't know how do you even do that? How do you begin to do that? Because for me, it's such a solitary job. It's like a solo sport, and then suddenly to have a partner. So I wasn't sure. But then we did talk, and we decided, because the fact is, don't you think, Hillary, that our publishers sort of thought, well, it's an interesting idea, but I think they were far from convinced that we could do it too.
I agree with that.
So they asked us to do, well, first of all, we talked. Do you think, is it worth it? Should we even take it the next step? And I think we both thought, you know what, we haven't signed anything, no commitment yet. Let's just take it the next step. And the next step, as it turns out, was writing a synopsis. I'll let you take it from here. We'd like a tag team. All right.
Yeah, we are a bit of a tag team. We began to, explore, okay, if we were to write a political thriller, given who we were, kind of what our sensibilities were, what we were interested in, we didn't have very many models. Like, oh, we would write something like fill in the blank. We had to really think through what would this look like, and then we began to talk about, characters. Obviously, we were both really inspired by our friendship with Betsy, who had been a great reader, which is how her publisher knew that I read Louise's books and kind of engineered a get together. So we thought, okay, let's at least go to that next step and try to figure out what would a plot look like and who would the characters be.
Mhm.
So that's when we did begin in earnest trying to figure out how to do this outline. And Louise has never done an outline, at least,
Not detailed, no, for sure.
not
You're
detailed,
But
right?
you had, because
But
as
I had.
nonfiction writers do.
I am kind of an outline sort of person. And I thought, well, let's see if this even made sense. And so we began, and we started getting caught up in it. We also found that, we kind of finished each other's sentences. We came up with ideas that the other, thought was, well, that's okay, but how about this? And kind of added to it. So 19 pages later, we had a quite detailed outline, which we then took a deep breath. We sent to our respective publishers, and they ended up saying, wow, that sounds like it'd be worth doing. So, okay, now the hard part starts.
But not before. Do you remember, because this was in the pandemic. So Hillary is at her home in New York, and I'm in Chappaqua, and I'm in north of Montreal at the lake house. We're both, sheltering in place. And we're tossing around ideas. And we really didn't like, what are we going to tell? Clearly, it would have the Secretary of State. We knew that it would have strong female characters. We had these sort of pillars in place, but that's just pillars. We needed the structure, we needed the roof, we needed the rooms, we needed all the rest of it. And there were times we were tossing out, what about this and how about that? I remember just sitting in the living room on FaceTime with you, staring at you and you staring at me. We were just we didn't know, we'd literally lost the plot. We had no idea what to say.
But at that point, Lissa, I really recall this so vividly. Louise asked exactly the right question. She said,
Finally.
yeah, well, but it took a while, and we couldn't get together, which was really a disadvantage. We couldn't sit in the same room and knock ideas around. So she said, okay, so what were the nightmares that kept you up at night as Secretary of State? And that just triggered a response from me where I talked about some of the things that I was most worried about. And one of them ends up as, the core of the plot in State of Terror, because I was deeply worried, as I continue to be, about terrorists getting hold of a nuclear weapon, whether it be a dirty bomb or something more sophisticated. Because I knew, and this is not classified, you can Google it and read about it, I knew that terrorists were always looking for nuclear material that they could, buy. And then they were looking for the expertise that they would need to try to put something together to literally terrify the world. And so as I was talking about that, I could see Louise's eyes getting bigger and bigger in our, FaceTime. And, and then she thought about it and came back and said, well, that could be, at the core of the plot.
Yeah.
It was. Did you think about the theme? Did the themes emerge from the plot, or did you have the sort of big? There are really big, deep themes in this book.
I think we had the plot first, because I think we really needed that for the background, the backbone of the synopsis. Mm-hmm. And I think the themes kind of emerged from that. I think once you have that, then there's a certain stability then you're free to explore. Because I think the best themes come out of exploration rather than setting it down. I'm not sure how many of the themes were actually in the synopsis, but they came out more organically as we're writing and as it became, what about we explore this? Now that doesn't work, but we'll explore this and this.
Right.
But we did know, as Louise mentioned, we did know that the protagonist would be a woman Secretary of State.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And for this, I was inspired by my longtime wonderful friend, Ellen Tauscher, who had been a member of Congress from California. And when I became Secretary of State, I asked if she would join the State Department as the Undersecretary for Arms Control, because she was one of the Congress's foremost experts on nuclear arms. And sadly, we lost both Ellen and Betsy within the space of literally 3 months in 2019. Ellen died in May and Betsy died in July. So, they were very fresh with us. And of course, although Louise didn't know Ellen, she knew Betsy very well. And I told her about Ellen and described what her friendship meant to me and what an extraordinary woman I thought she was as a leader. So we knew that we wanted a woman Secretary of State, but we also, each of us had kind of dubbed this project. I dubbed it the Betsy Project. And, Louise dubbed it with Betsy's full name, which was Voda Johnson Ebeling, the Voda Johnson Ebeling Project. So we talked a lot about Betsy, and since our friendship was really so intertwined with Betsy, and it was really at the core of this request that we write together, we wanted women's friendships, and we wanted a character like Betsy, someone who is loyal and strong and funny and supportive and everything that she is, to be in the book. And so I told Louise about a position in the State Department called counselor, which you get to fill with somebody that you want to be literally at your right hand, working on projects, supporting you. So Louise loved that idea.
Well, I did that, and that was key. That was key because part of the structural problem is, and one of the believability issues in something like this is, how do you make this a female buddy, which we wanted it to be about relationships and strong bonds between women, and how powerful that is. But how do you bring in a best friend into a political thriller with the Secretary of State? And as soon as Hillary said, well, she's allowed a counselor, well, then that allowed all the rest of it, and allowed us then to really thoroughly explore. And I remember Hillary and I, you and I talked about, we didn't have to do this. Hillary has an incredibly full life. I have a full life and career, but we wanted something that would challenge us. Mm-hmm. And this certainly did. And we also wanted to write a book that would be fun, that would be fascinating, that would explore all sorts of different issues, but a book that really didn't exist. We wanted a book that we would love to read and love to have out there. And that's a political thriller with two strong women of a certain age at its core.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to ask you this later, but since we're on the topic, I'll ask it now. I had been thinking, Secretary Glenn, how much time of your life you have spent dealing with, imagining, worrying about the dangers of, like we said, global terrorism, nuclear war, genocide, climate change, assaults on democracy. I mean, that was, literally kept you awake, I don't know for how long, and probably still does. And Louise, your mysteries also grapple with uncertainty, and more the uncertainties of everyday life. What happens to people when cataclysms, change their trajectory, and it can be a crime, a death, a loss, a heartbreak. Mm. And so friendship, obviously, for both of you, becomes this strand through this book of people dealing both global, in proximate ways, but in global ways, about all this uncertainty that's just washing over them and washing over the world. And so you did pick these people who were close to you to sort of celebrate in the book by naming major characters after them. And Louise, we should, and maybe you'll talk for a minute about about General Whitehead, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who's a little bit sketchy there for a while in the book. I'm not going to give anything away, but has a very personal resonance for you, not of a friend, but of a friend and family.
Yes, yes. My husband's last name was Whitehead, and so we wanted to throw that in as well. And oddly enough, his father was a general, so that was kind of fun to throw in. But it was interesting. It was important for us that these be inspired by real life people, so that we had that underpinning, emotional underpinning, and so that the characters weren't just cardboard cutouts there to move the plot along, but actually were living and breathing, and that we hope that the readers recognize them as human beings and recognize maybe themselves in them as well.
Listen, one of the many things that I love about Louise's Gamache series is the way that the characters stay with you. They almost do become friends. I mean, you feel like you're living there in the village of Three Pines, and you go to the bistro or to the bookstore. I mean, you just get a sense of belonging that she has created. And it was such an extraordinary experience for me to be part of this process with her, because creating characters that you want to spend time with, who are, yes, brave, but also insecure, who have all of the, pluses and minuses of human nature, and still get up every day and try to do their best and try to take on, bad stuff when it happens. And I really loved how that was core to what we did, because when I think about these characters, people say, well, who are they based on? Well, of course, yes, Betsy and Ellen were inspiring to us, but we draw from so many people that we know and admire, but we didn't want them to be caricatures. We wanted them to be full, breathing, living women. And I don't think there has ever been a book written, particularly a political thriller, that includes both Spanx and moose pajamas.
Eminence blonde or whatever, right?
Eminence blonde, right? I mean, so when
don't they all? Hillary, I'm shocked.
Flannel moose pajamas with Spanx. I mean, you are connecting with people.
I think I told both of you that when I was lucky to be able to read an early PDF copy of it, actually, before it was even a manuscript. And I literally would go through parts of this book and just imagine the two of you howling with laughter.
Oh my God. Oh my God, the laughter.
So there's a tremendous amount of humor in the book. I mean, there really is. And there's wonderful references to poetry. It's a page turner. There's intrigue, there's suspense, there's deceit. But getting back to what you were mentioning about the sort of the centrality of women and their experiences in this narrative, and how rare that is. And what I find fascinating, you sort of alluded to it, is the willingness to present characters whose vulnerabilities actually are strengths. I don't think men ever do that when they write about themselves or other men. They just, men are strong, that's it. Or they're terribly weak and they're just, a failure as a result. And I wanted to ask you, because, this book really features women who are constantly underestimated and who are subject to professional double standards and who are perceived as threatening. I don't want to ruin the whole plot, but since it happens right at the beginning, the Secretary of State is appointed by a former political rival who basically wants to sabotage her because he's threatened by her. And yet over the course of the book, as you're saying, you see that it's really the competence of women and the friendship of women and the way women communicate with one another that essentially saves the world from disaster and from the follies of these selfish, craven male leaders. But
now I do want to say that not every man was
every man was bad, and not every woman was great.
No, that's very true.
No, but that's not true. That's not true. We have
not every woman.
We have a woman villain in here.
That's what I'm saying. Not every woman is really imperfect. No, definitely. This is not, and I think that's one of the things I love about the book is that it's nuanced in that way. So don't get me wrong. But You know, I just, it's interesting that Ellen Dunn, the Secretary of State, the protagonist really in the early pages she does not inspire confidence right off the bat. I mean, she's, you know, she has failed on this diplomatic mission to North Korea. She returns to Washington as, you know, like a big hot mess. She's like being ridiculed. We know the president's out to get her. She's failing. She's doing everything wrong. She's over her, whatever she is perceived as kind of a joke almost. And I just find it interesting that you were willing to go there. And over the course of the book, that vulnerability or being underestimated becomes such an important part of the story, at least for me. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, how your own experiences led you to convey how and to think about how women articulate and exercise power.
Well, Hillary, this is something that was, you know, that was so clear in your experience as, you know, a senior politician, as a Secretary of State, and you would come back from major missions with unbelievable accomplishments, and all people talk about was your hair or what you were wearing or your shoes.
Well, that is certainly the case. We did want to poke fun at the whole appearance conundrum that women confront. The double standard, as you know, is alive and well. I told Louise this, and some of you may have heard this story from Hard Choices or from my talking about it. But, you know, I remember, traveling constantly as we did. I went to 112 countries, and, you know, it is hard to get enough sleep. It's hard to, you know, get everything you need to get done. And, you know, I remember going to a meeting with a prime minister, and the plane landed, we got off the plane. I pulled my hair back, I put makeup on. I mean, I thought I looked okay. And so we get to the meeting, and I'm sitting there, and the prime minister is literally just staring at me. And it's quite uncomfortable because he hasn't really said anything. And finally, you know, I better break the ice. I said, well, you know, Mr. Prime Minister, is there something you want to say? Is there a problem that you want to get out on the table before we begin our discussions? And he goes, well, I was told if your hair is pulled back, you're in a bad mood. I said, no, this is what's called a bad hair day. You know, but we wanted to convey, that experience, which is something that, you know, most women who are in any kind of public facing job have encountered from time to time. And we wanted it, you know, to be part of the presentation of Ellen, this incredibly accomplished woman who had been running an international media empire, who had been, on the opposite side with her, media from the man who got elected president, who then turned around and, much to her surprise, asked her to be Secretary of State. And it was a way of saying, boy, you know, she was in the job like literally for a month, and this is not easy.
Yeah, poking fun at it, and then having her turn it around to her advantage. And I think, you know, again, I think any woman listening has had that experience where we've been underestimated, we've been diminished, we've, and yet after a while you begin to learn how to use that to your advantage. And that's something that we wanted to put in too, that these women aren't victims in any way, that they learn they use their brains, they use their wits to get what they want. And some of my favorite scenes are the ones with other world leaders, and I won't say which leaders or where they are, but where the secretary there is this game of wits with who do you trust? What do you say? Trying to pick up on, and you talked about this, Hillary, trying to pick up on what isn't being said, on the tone, on the body language, on these things as subtle as an eye movement, and picking up on all these clues that I think women can often do quite well.
Well, and the listening is such a big part of Ellen Adams's success, right? In outwitting and strategizing, and also listening to herself, I think. And anybody who's worked with Secretary Clinton, as I have, and now you have, knows she's an exceptional. She's a insanely exceptional listener, and it's a tremendous skill, and you can apply it in so many different ways. I wanted to just get back to this idea of fiction writing, because Secretary Clinton, you said that your life basically is the stuff of fiction, so why not try fiction? And Louise, you were worried about making the transition from crime to terror as a sort of centerpiece of a mystery or a thriller. But this is loose fictionalization of certain people that are very familiar in our consciousness. And, there's some question of, well, wait, is she just trying to get back at these people who nearly blew up the entire universe? Or is there a deeper message? I choose to believe that there's a reason that we use loose fictionalization, but I'd love to hear you both talk about how you do that. I mean, how much do you want to be really a representation of a real life figure who we wish were fictional, or events that we wish were fictional? And how much of it, are you still trying to kind of guise for reasons of fiction?
Listen, that's a great question, because we never talked about how, oh boy, we're gonna put this guy in the hot seat. We're gonna really skewer him. But what we did do was to think about characters who sadly are realistic.
Mm-hmm.
You could not have lived through the prior administration without realizing, yes, it's possible to have a president who is heedless and reckless and easily manipulated by flattery and obsequiousness, and therefore prey to doing things that are not in the best interests of the country by adversaries from without and within when it comes to our democracy. So it is not in any way the former, but it is among the number of lessons in this book, a reminder that you can agree or disagree with the presidents that we've had, going back to the beginning, and none of them was perfect. But I don't think any of us thought that that the country itself was subject to the total whims and narcissism of the leader, as we all worried over the prior 4 years. So it was a lesson. I mean, this whole book is a cautionary tale. Yes, we think it's fun. We think it's funny. We think you'll love the characters, and the characters evolve, like Ellen and the president who appointed her. They evolved. They learned to trust each other. So it's got a great arc. It's got a really intense story, but it is a cautionary tale, and it is something that I think about a lot, because I am worried about our democracy and about the assault coming from the outside, the role that social media plays, the refusal by a well-funded, powerful minority to accept a multicultural, pluralistic democracy with different kinds of people, and their effort to try to limit who can be a real American. We're living through all of this, and I think the characters reflect that. So they reflect what is actually happening, and certainly, I am someone who worries about Afghanistan once again becoming a place where terrorist attacks can be plotted and planned from. So, the book is very real. It's a cautionary tale, but it's fiction.
Right. No, exactly. Had we written this 5 or 6 years ago, people would have said this is ludicrous. Now people are saying, well, how much of this is real? It's all based on real life. Yeah, and we have sections in the book where many of the characters are saying, is this a coup attempt? Is this, they're not sure. Is it not? What's exactly what's happening? Because there are the threats, the terrors from the external, which are obvious and very real and very threatening. But then there's the internal as well. We're so busy sort of looking into the dark closet to see what monster is there, we forget to look behind us and see what's already in the room.
Well, that's one of the really kind of depressing things in the book. I mean, to the extent that I don't think we think about that. And then you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, there may be somebody inside who's orchestrating a lot of this. And so this really, gets to the question, and maybe the answer is obvious, but, fiction really in some ways lets us get to a deeper truth, does it not? I mean, and did you feel that, so particularly in writing fiction, you had greater license in a way? I don't know if you did.
I certainly did. I felt liberated, and you actually helped me on, some of those nonfiction books that I've written, Lissa, and how absolutely determined we were to never get a single fact, wrong by one scintilla off from what it was. And it was so painstaking because I knew I would be, really judged harshly if I made a mistake in any nonfiction work. So being able to learn about fiction and watch a master at work like Louise was it was liberating and exhilarating. And, we wanted the plot, we wanted the characters to certainly be realistic and recognizable, but I didn't have to worry about every single thing that we were, plotting or considering because it was fiction. And I loved that experience.
And it also allows people to approach really gnarly and painful issues without having it shoved down their throat like some kind of bitter pill. Mm-hmm. So, they can do it in a form of entertainment and with any luck sort of begin to reflect on it as they're reading.
Well, we're going to turn to audience questions in a second, and I have a couple more questions. But first, before we get to the audience, I just want to ask you both, what was the hardest thing about writing a book with the, understanding that you both had some doubts at the beginning? Louise, you had to make this transition to a different kind of thriller, and you also had to write with somebody else. And Secretary Clinton, you had to dip your toe in the fiction world, which it sounds like you really enjoyed. But what was the hardest thing?
I can't say, to be fair, I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish, but Hillary is really an exceptional person. I don't have to tell you that, Lissa, but smart and funny and thoughtful. And I know that when I didn't know how we would work together when we had conflicting ideas. If she put forward an idea and I didn't agree, how would she take that? How should I put that? And vice versa. But when we were writing the synopsis, I think that at that point it became clear, because we did have disagreements over just, should we go left? Should we go right? Should we go, where should we go? And we were able to be honest and respectful with each other. And you talked about her listening, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone who is such an active, profound listener, who doesn't just listen to the words, but listens to the tone. And that, that is really very freeing. It allows, I think, for a real genuine exchange of ideas. So she's really remarkable, despite the fact that she DF'd the entire manuscript.
Yeah, Louise is being very kind. And yes, I did DF the manuscript. Took about 70% of the profanity out.
It shrunk it in half, then took out like 500 pages.
There's still a lot in there, but I mean, yeah, the book would have been 1,000 pages. But the other thing that she is being too kind to mention, and you know this too, Lissa, is I still write in longhand, and bless her heart. I mean, she really took it like a trooper, although nearly pulled her hair out, reading my handwriting, me, printing out everything.
Honestly, I might as well have been etching it into stone tablets. Have you never heard of a laptop, for God's sake?
Well, 20 years ago, we could forgive her for the writing in longhand, even 10 years ago, but it is 2021 and most of us are now writing on devices, but we'll save that for
we got to mock. I mocked her for that, and she mocked me for the moose flannel pajamas, because we would do our FaceTime at 7 p.m. and we were both in bed.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, you get a lot done wearing your moose pajamas, clearly.
In bed.
So we have a great question here from a Lisa in the Lisa M. Over the course of your friendship, what have you learned about each other that was completely unexpected? You may have just answered that, Louise. I don't know, but maybe there's something else.
Well,
The question is posed to both of you.
Well, I can't say it was unexpected as I got to know Louise, but when Betsy, made our introduction and we got to begin to spend time with each other, I just found her curiosity, her openness, her sensibilities to be so appealing in every way, and she is gracious and loving and just a tremendous friend. And she has said over the course of not only our friendship but also during the rollout of this book, a lot of people don't take the risk to make really good friends as adults. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. People say, yeah, well, I'm kind of done with, making new friends. I don't want to go through the emotional labor. I don't want to have to get to know somebody. And I was just very fortunate that, that was not at all Louise's attitude, but it is a common view that people have. And I can only hope that, maybe some of the folks watching will be a little less cautious, because my life has been incredibly enriched with this late in life friendship that Louise and I and our whole extended circle. Because
Yes.
if you'd been a friend of Betsy's, she brought with you a legion of wonderful people, and Louise has become friends with all of them. So it's a special treat.
And that was one of there were so many surprises, because of course I knew Hillary as the public figure, but I didn't know how funny she is, how warm she is. We talk about Betsy having the gift of friendship, which she does, but boy, that's one of the things the two of you had in common. Hillary has friends and bosom friends from grade school, from high school, who she's kept in touch with when it would be so easy to drift apart because of the hectic nature of her life, but is kept in with those friends. And how inclusive, how warm and kind. And I'm quite an introvert, so I don't, I have a lot of acquaintances. I have just a small handful of close friends. And for me, one quality that's so important is knowing that, how do I put this, that I'm safe. And I don't mean physically safe, but emotionally safe, that I can, my flaws, my yearnings, my dreams are safe with this person, and I know that they're safe with Hillary. That she can be the crucible into which I can put all of that, and she's a remarkable person, and I wish more people knew how really incredible she is as a human being. Never mind as a politician.
Well, Louise, you may not know this, but as evidence of exactly what you're talking about, those of us who work for her in the White House and beyond, but especially beginning in the White House, became friends of her friends. So
Yeah.
Betsy Ebling was friends of all of ours. We used to call her up and talk about things and get information. And did she have an idea about this or that? And we would see her whenever she was in Washington at the White House. She became a real fixture for a lot of the people, working at that time for the then First Lady. And, it was true of several other close friends, sadly, some of whom also have passed away. But can I just ask one quick question about the writing about these close friends and writing about, somebody who has the name of your husband, at least the last name of your husband? Was it cathartic, or was it hard to go to that place when you miss these people every day and you're really writing and wrestling with these characters every day?
Hillary, how did you find it?
I found it both hard and cathartic. And, toward the end, we named the characters Betsy and Ellen, and we stuck with those names. At the end, though, I said to Louise, I better call their families, because I want them to know that we view this as a, somewhat of a tribute, even though they're fictional. They're not the real people that we knew and loved. So I called, Betsy's widower, Tom, whom I've known forever. And he was like, he was almost speechless. I mean, it was something that he was so struck by. And he said, well, yes, of course. Wow, I can't believe you and Louise, because he's gotten to be friends with Louise, are doing this. And then I called Catherine, Ellen's daughter, and in the book, Ellen Adams's daughter is also named Catherine. And I asked Catherine, I said, Catherine, I'm writing this book with Louise Penny, and the character of the Secretary of State is named Ellen Adams. And I was thinking about your mother the whole time. I want the world to know what an amazing person your mom was. And she too was like, oh, wow, yeah. And then today, I have to tell you this, because today, Catherine texted me, and she had been, closing out all of her mother's accounts, and she found an old Amazon account that she didn't know that her mom had had. And she was about to close it out, and she found from 2015 a review that Ellen Tauscher had written of a Gamache novel.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I mean, what a discovery.
Wow.
And Catherine sent that to me, and I forwarded it to Louise, because even though they didn't meet, there was Louise through her characters influencing and giving great delight to
Isn't
my
that
friend
beautiful?
years ago.
Stars aligning. Stars aligning.
Wow.
That's an
Wow,
amazing
such
story.
grace. That it's amazing, isn't it? How these things connect. One of my favorite lines is, and because it makes these people immortal, but they aren't absolutely them. But one of my favorite lines is describing when they first meet Ellen and Betsy, and through the years, and we say that Ellen taught Betsy that goodness exists, and Betsy taught Ellen how to kick attackers in the nuts.
By the way, Betsy really did not use as much foul language
Betsy
as
would,
Betsy in the book, right? Am I wrong about that?
Oh, no, absolutely
No.
not. That's why we say she's fictional. I mean,
no, no.
I mean, it's
But
very
the core,
effective.
the love these two women feel for each other, and I think
the core attributes are very much her.
which is again
Yeah.
something that is rare, if ever, in political thrillers, but is very common in real life, and we wanted to reflect that.
Well, Louise, you really don't have female. I mean, your main protagonists are male, so
Right.
that was a big switch probably for you too. What was that
Right.
like?
Well, I've got a lot of the villagers there's Clara and Myrna and Ruth and others, and they're all strong, smart women. No, it's true. I mean, I've been asked, and I honestly don't know the answer to it, except that Gamache, my main character, really is based on my husband, Michael. So that's why the main character was him, because it was fun writing about someone I love. Just like Ellen and Betsy. It lends a depth and a sense of the respect that we need to have, of responsibility to get this right.
We have a question here that you've sort of answered, but maybe you'll elaborate. And it's from Jonathan. And it is, how much of the book was influenced by current affairs and the past few years of the American political landscape? I think you've answered that broadly, but maybe you could expound just a second more on, I just want to get to the urgency of why you're writing about this after these last few years. And maybe you can just say a little bit more about that.
Look, I mean, one of the reviewers, used that cliche that it's ripped from the headlines. Well, actually, it is ripped from the headlines.
Yeah.
But it's also a kind of reflection on the trend lines. It's not just what happens right now and what we just lived through and what could happen because of really bad guys getting hold of nuclear material, but what are we doing? I mean, why are we politicizing a disease? Why are we arguing about life-saving vaccines? Why are we trying to stop people from voting? what is going on? I mean, it truly is a cautionary tale, because there's so much that is happening that is an attempt to really turn the clock back, to undermine our institutions, to undermine the rule of law, to sort of impose a view about who is or isn't a real American on the rest of us, and to control women's choices and who you love, and what kind of religion is legitimate. I mean, this is all happening in real time. And so our book is very much about what is happening right now. Yes, it's fiction, but we do want readers not just to be entertained and, have a laugh and maybe, have a thrill along the way. We want readers to say, whoa, this sadly is realistic. And, at the very end of the acknowledgments, the last line in the whole book is truly a very plaintive statement that I wrote about how it's up to us to make sure this remains fiction, right? So to the viewer's question, it's very real. And maybe through fiction, through the characters who consider themselves patriots because they're going to return our country to the real Americans, maybe that is a way of breaking through some of the denial and delusion and other emotions that are clouding our thinking and dividing us. And that would be, a very good outcome as far as I think we're concerned.
I mean, we have The Handmaid's Tale alive and well in Texas, and
Yes.
and other. I mean, it really is. So having women characters has that benefit as well. No, I mean, it really is terrifying. Speaking of which, and I don't want to give the book away, and I don't want to give the ending away, but the ending to me was, I wouldn't say surprising, but I just wonder how you decided to end the book where you did without giving the whole 9 yards away. Because to me, it was another sort of jolt.
In terms of like the last few lines, or
In terms of, basically the last page where you're sort of imagining scenarios again.
Right. I mean, I think what we wanted to say is that life isn't neat. Things aren't all, and they lived happily ever after. And the fact is that there is a cascade of issues and problems and challenges ahead. And so, this happened, but there are other things out there. And so I think we just wanted to say, that as Hillary said, we're not just looking at what's happening now, we're looking at going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I really took it as a kind of don't get complacent message.
Yeah.
Just because the good guys won this time,
right?
You can't count on the good guys winning next time if you just sit still.
That's right.
So Louise, you, I believe you say it in the acknowledgements, you say the book is an examination of hate, but a celebration of love. Can you talk for a second more about that? That's such a beautiful way of describing it.
I love Hillary and I both talk about poetry, and we both have a love of poetry. And one poet that we share is Auden, and the lines from Auden about that goodness existed, that was the new knowledge. His terror had to blow itself quite out to let him see it. And so the book is about goodness. It's about belonging. It's about friendship. It's about the power of community. It's about terror. But at the end of the day, where's your safe harbor? It's with the people you love. The First Corinthians. Why do so many people quote it at weddings, at christenings, at funerals? Because it's about love. And if you don't have love, you have nothing. And that's what this is all about. Ellen and the others can run around to their heart's content. They can save the world, but it's callow without love. And so, this book is about terror. It's about terrible things happening, terrible threats, real and imagined. But it's about love and goodness and kindness and friendship.
And the poetic references, so Secretary Clinton keeps phrases and lines and words and things that have meaning for her that she collects. I mean, you've talked about this, so I'm not revealing any big secrets. And it's really a wonderful habit because you have these things that you can draw on at various times. And Louise, do you do that with poetry? So are the lines of poetry, you have you have references to John Donne in the book, and you have some other lines.
Yeah, in Flanders Fields, and
yeah.
Flanders Fields, the poppies
Were
blow.
those things that you've sort of been waiting to use? Or are they part of an ongoing curated collection? Or are these things that while you're writing, the two of you were writing, you sort of determined you wanted to look to poetry or literary references for some kind of deepening of what you were trying to say?
Well, Hillary and I, a few days ago, actually had this conversation about important people in our lives and our grandfathers. And my grandfather on my mother's side was very important to me. And he was the one who would take me for walks through the garden and hold my hand, and he would just recite poetry. And I learned very early that poetry isn't something to be intimidated by, and it doesn't exist over here and my life is over here, that the two are melded. And yeah, I'm pointing over into the living room where I have a notebook full of quotes as well, and poems. And I love memorizing poems so that, you know, I can just sort of sit quietly and go through different ones in my mind. And then I think part of the key for anything, and Hillary, you must have found this, particularly when you're writing nonfiction, is knowing when not to use it. You know, because I mean, that gets a little obnoxious too. Oh my God, another Auden quote. But so when it is the telling detail, when it's going to move something forward, when it has two or three purposes, like the In Flanders Fields, which is something Ellen comes back to time and again. If ye break faith with those who die, it's just over and over. I'm not going to break faith. I will not break faith with those who have died. Then it becomes useful, like the John Donne, when thou hast done. So when to use them and when not, but of course you have to know they exist in the first place in order to be able to use them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's one of the great pleasures of reading the Gamache series, and to have the curmudgeonly, quite profane poet Ruth quoting all kinds of lines from her own poetry and others. And in this book, it was such a joy to see how Louise wove in poetry. And in fact, at a couple of occasions, one in particular, and one very fraught scene, you know, there was a literary allusion, and then a few pages later another, and she goes, "Well, do you think we've overdone it?" And I erred on the side of no. I want to leave those both in, because, you know, they do take the scene deeper. They also connect it to something bigger outside of the scene and give, you know, the reader even more food for thought. So I really love the use of the you know, the lines from poetry and allusions, and then we do have a funny device about how Betsy and Ellen know whether they're really talking to each other because of, you know, a literary device that they have used for years. So yeah, it does have those features, but we think it deepens and really enriches the characters and the story.
And again, I mean, how often in thrillers, you know, is John Donne?
No, I mean, I love it. I'm on the Secretary Clinton side. I would want more of them, especially because you do them so well, you know, that you integrate them so well. So no, I totally get it. I've been wanting to ask you about that. So believe it or not, we are basically out of time, but not so out of time that I'm not going to hijack a last question from the audience, but slightly contort it for my own purposes. So the person wants to know if there might be a sequel in the works, but I would like to ask that question this way, which is, you say in the acknowledgements, and you alluded to this at the outset, that you came up with several, I think it was 3 nightmare scenarios that the plot of this book could be based on. And you picked the one that you used as one of the 3 that you were choosing from. So will you tell us what the other two are? Or if not, and will you tell us if one of them might be a sequel to this book?
Oh, Lissa, you are so smart. And I hate to disappoint you, but no, we're not going to tell you. But we also have made no decision whatsoever. I mean, this is such a wonderful and really all-encompassing experience, you know, having written this book, kind of given it to the world. We're obviously thrilled that our thriller is getting such a good response from reviews and readers. That I don't think either one of us has, you know, the bandwidth or the energy to think
It's so
doing
true.
anything else other than continuing to talk to, you know, smart people like you who love books and do our best to really be fair to the creative process that led to this book and the characters who inhabit it and the story that it tells and the lessons that we think are in it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I will grant you that it's monumentally unfair to ask somebody the day after their book has been published if they're ready for the next one. So, but
you know what? I have to say, it's much better than hearing you say, geez, I hope you don't write another one. So,
yes, it was.
thank you, Lissa, for that.
And I think the questioner in the audience was placing it from enthusiasm. So, well, look, this is the book. Everybody watching, please read it. It really, it covers so many bases. Like I said, it's got humor, it's got poetry, it's got these hilarious asides, it's got deep themes, it's got this urgent message, but it also has, as Louise was saying a minute or two ago, a really poignancy about the importance of love in people's lives. And you know, here are two friends who are modeling in this writing and in this book what the power of friendship can do creatively, but also clearly, I'm sure the two of you are just like everyone else, trying to make your way every day in this crazy world and trying to stay on top of things and stay at least moderately sane. And the fact that you could produce this book and that it's a product of such a genuine and caring and respectful and creative friendship is really inspiring, I know, to me, and I'm sure to everybody watching. So what a pleasure. Thank you both. Congratulations. And everybody's going to need this for their holiday presents. So thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
So thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who tuned in.
Yes, this has been fantastic. And thanks to Politics and Prose. See you, Hillary.
We hope you all stay very well and stay very well read. Good night, everyone.